Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Executive Director of the Empire State Pride Agenda, Ross Levi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that amazing reception. It's inspiring to see so many wonderful friends here tonight to celebrate the Pride Agenda's 20th anniversary. I want to thank the dinner chairs and vice chairs and the entire dinner committee for making this evening such a record-breaking success. I'm also deeply grateful for the leadership of our board members over the years, including our current co-chairs, Marla Hassner and Louis Bradbury, as well as our incredibly hardworking staff, past and present. But the base of the Empire State Pride Agenda, the cornerstone on which we have built this great organization, is all of you. You are the activists, the donors, the visionaries, and the volunteers. Some of you have been with us for all of our 20 years, a true testament to our organization. We are deeply honored to have your support. Thank you. Well, what a difference a year makes. When we gathered last year, it was the first fall dinner since the defeated marriage vote in the New York State Senate. We were facing daunting elections, working both to increase the number of pro-LGBT legislators and determine whether our next governor would be a champion for our community or somebody who called our lives invalid. We all know how it went. We worked hard, making contributions, volunteering on campaigns, and getting out the vote. As a result, we saw a net gain of 2 additional pro-LGBT votes in our state Senate, our support solidified in the Assembly, and the election of our amazing champion, Governor Andrew Cuomo. Together, we made history when on July 24th, 2011, all loving, committed couples could finally marry here in the Empire State. We changed New York, and in doing so, we changed the nation. But as easy as it is to focus on the few months leading up to the historic marriage win, we must not forget the many years that it took to achieve this victory. We took public support from around 35% when the Pride Agenda first started working on marriage in the early 2000s to just shy of 60% last year. That didn't happen by accident. The Pride Agenda's years of work on the ground made this possible by spurring thousands of person-to-person conversations, creating deep roots with our elected officials, and drawing in non-traditional allies. I want to tell you about just a few examples of how we use this strong foundation built over the course of a decade to win marriage this year. For years, the Pride Agenda has stood with organized labor on issues including work conditions and the right to organize. These connections meant that before the 2011 legislative session even began, 2.1 million New Yorkers were in unions that had passed resolutions in support of our freedom to marry. This year, our union brothers and sisters took on this issue as their own, holding rallies across the state and making their resources available to our campaign. For years, the Pride Agenda stood with businesses to help them be more supportive of their LGBT employees and customers. This year, we turned to them. And as a result, the mayor of Rochester, a prominent upstate businessman himself, stood on the steps of City Hall with business leaders, including from Xerox and State Farm, to announce that more than 250 large and small businesses all across New York State were in support of marriage. It was 6 days later that Rochester Senator James Alesi, the Born That Way Republican you saw in the video, dedicated his support for marriage equality. In the final weeks of the legislative session, our religious opponents began gathering in the Capitol. I know many of you have heard in past years us talk about the over 700 clergy and lay leaders that we organized around marriage. And this year, we were able to call them and say, "We need you now." Scores of these faith leaders packed the hallways of the Capitol, standing side by side with religious opponents, sometimes even singing the same songs like "This Little Light of Mine." After years of being pitted as the gays versus religion, for the better part of a week, dozens of ministers, rabbis, and other faith leaders held vigil for our equality day after day in our state capitol. This is how our work over the past years came to fruition. Together with our coalition partners in New Yorkers United for Marriage, many of whom are here this evening, we spurred over 125,000 contacts between constituents and their legislators. Together, New Yorkers stood up and spoke the truth, that our families deserve the same protections as all others, and that all loving, committed couples should be allowed to marry. Our elected officials in Albany heard us, they followed the will of the people, and they passed marriage here in the Empire State. Now the question on everyone's mind is, what's next? Well, for one thing, we cannot take this win for granted. We must be vigilant watchdogs of our government, making sure our legislative wins hold and live up to their promise. And in November of 2012, when every legislator who voted for marriage faces re-election, we must stand by those who stood by us and make sure no one has their support for equality used against them in their run for public office. Right now, in our state, hardworking New Yorkers are being fired from their jobs and evicted from their homes simply for being transgender. Until every LGBT person is treated fairly under the law, we cannot say we are truly equal. Let us commit to getting a statewide transgender non-discrimination bill passed in New York, just like 15 other states have done. We must also remember that there are still LGBT youth who are being bullied or who are homeless, elders who are fearful that they will be denied their dignity in long-term care facilities, and people who will face insensitivity when going to doctors and counselors. This past year, in an incredibly challenging economic climate, the Pride Agenda secured over $5 million of state funding for community organizations all across the state that provide for these needs. We must continue to demand that we are visible to our government and that the state funds our fair share of the essential services we need. We should not, however, have any illusion about the environment in which we are working. We have won an extraordinary victory, but it has also fueled our opposition. The so-called National Organization for Marriage has pledged to spend $2 million on defeating the courageous legislators who did the right thing on marriage equality. The New York State Conservative Party has virulently opposed, among other things, providing transgender New Yorkers their basic equality and even access to medically necessary health care. Our opponents have not gone away, not by a long shot. And they don't just want to defeat us in the legislative arena. They want to deny us the very substance of our equality and our fundamental dignity as citizens and human beings, and we will not let that happen. The Pride Agenda has been here for 20 years, and after winning more than 70 legislative and governmental victories, no one can deny our record of concrete achievement. There is only one organization that is dedicated exclusively to our state, our government, and the range of issues affecting us as LGBT New Yorkers, and that organization is the Empire State Pride Agenda. Already, we have changed the world so that children growing up today will only know a New York where everyone can marry the person they love. Together, we created that world for them. But I am reminded of a quote by Nelson Mandela. He said, "I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not yet ended." The Pride Agenda's legacy is that we know how to do the work of changing hearts and minds and accessing the power of government to climb the great hills that others say will be impossible to scale. But as much as we revel in the progress we have made, we look to the horizon. And as we do so, we will no doubt hear some wonder, as they have in the past, whether we can conquer the obstacles that lie ahead of us. My response to those who say we can't: just watch us. We can achieve a statewide transgender non-discrimination law. We can have our health and human service needs met by our government. We can defend our marriage win, even having it resonate at the federal level to help undo the odious Defense of Marriage Act. We can and we will. Just think of what we have done. We succeeded in getting fair-minded non-LGBT New Yorkers to stop saying, "Marriage equality, that has nothing to do with me." We won marriage because we got thousands of other people to care, not necessarily because it affected them directly, but because they saw it as part of a fight for justice, for something bigger, for a New York State they were more proud to be a part of because everyone was more free. This is now our work, our responsibility, our next mountain to climb. I love the Empire State Pride Agenda because we are an organization that has always been about something bigger than ourselves. I ask you, stand with us as we continue on the path to justice. I promise we will continue forging ahead to achieve not only equality under the law for LGBT New Yorkers, but a freer and more just Empire State for all. We dare not linger, for our long walk is not yet ended. Onward to justice. Thank you. Good night.